Hi everyone, it's Rebecca, the Colorful Book Nester here at Rivercrest Cottage, and I am here to have another discussion of listening to literature. So, as I have previously talked about, I do listen to quite a few Audible books. I love listening to them as I'm driving to work, back and forth, and then I also love listening to them whenever I'm coloring, whenever I just really want to be able to focus on my coloring and not something that's going on television or that needs you to check in visually, I guess. This book is one that I want to talk about the actual book, and its production and the audible part of it was fine. The narrator was fine. I don't think it really added anything. The one thing this book allowed me to do was fast forward through some bits that were a little bit rough and a little bit tough to listen to. So let's just kind of talk about the book. So, Educated is the author's story of how she was born and raised in a family of end of time believers and constantly preparing for the end of the world. They were a family, the father did not believe in using medical anything other than at home, so they never went to a hospital. They were not educated in public schools or any schools. They were homeschooled in this case, and it's a very, as you listen to the book, you quickly realize it was not much of an education. They are a family who try to live off the grid as much as possible. They don't like including the government in anything, hence the not going to public school, believing that there's kind of a lot of conspiracy type ideas. They are Mormon by religion, but their extremist part of them is not necessarily an aspect of the Mormon culture or beliefs, but they are very highly religious, and the father is really the director of where this family goes. She has several brothers. We learn a little bit about each one of those. Now, I will warn you, this book, I am sure has plenty of trigger warnings. Do go out and take a look at them. It deals with some really tough stuff. When we're talking, there is, some people would believe child abuse. That has a lot to do with the environment in which they were raised, the belief system, whether it was not going into hospitals for help. It was also kind of, this, an interesting aspect was it was sibling child abuse, which is more mental, not just consistent mental abuse to some degree. Very, very tough. The mother is a midwife. She becomes quite famous for her not only midwifery, but also, or wiffery, however you say that, but also for her homemade tonics and stuff. But one of the things that's crazy in this book, and one of the reasons it was so hard for me to read, was that it's just anecdote after anecdote after anecdote of families that, they get into physical danger a lot. A lot of it is through this blank trust that the Lord is keeping his eye out for you and going to protect you. So safety rules don't seem to be something. And the father's always feeling he's running out of time, so he's pushing. They have a scrap metal business. There are several moments throughout this whole book where people are in very, very dire situations. Horrible physical pain would be associated with, and she doesn't bat an eye about talking about it. And at times I felt like it kind of went on too long, so I actually hit the jump 30 seconds or whatever it is, because I was like, okay, you've got a steel bar through your leg, I got it, let's go. Because it was so uncomfortable. I have a very, very strong visual mind. And the visual images are pretty, they're set in there, and I can't get them out very easily. So this whole book, I was not enjoying 75% of it. That's probably a horrible, I was just not enjoying it. It doesn't mean I wasn't intrigued. It doesn't mean that it wasn't making me think. In fact, it was just confusing as to how it was making me think. The last third of the book was the moment when I felt a little bit slapped in the face of, oh, I get what you did there. And this book really makes you think. So the whole story is she's raised in this area, separate from, she doesn't have friends growing up very much. It wasn't until she's like 12 or 13, and it's a bizarre reason as to how she starts getting out into more what I consider public. and she starts learning other points of view. She starts learning other little tidbits of history and things that maybe she wasn't exactly privy to prior to this exposure. And then subsequently, her one brother does make it off to college, and he kind of encourages her. I would like to have known more about his story of how and why he went the way he did. It, this whole book brings up things of, do you fit in your own family? Do you feel that you're an actual part of this family? Are you so different than your family? And how do you stay true to yourself? But there's also these tiebacks, and the continuance through it eventually is the way she gets out is through education, of course. And that education is not always formal. She needed some just exposure to other ideas in the outside world and other possible explanations for things, other than what, as a 7 and 8 year old, she's always believed from her father and her mother. And that's something we need to take into consideration. Is we are, from the moment that we're born, relying on our parents. And whether you and I believe that they're good parents, that child believes they're good parents. That child, to live and survive, you have to believe that your parents have your best interest at heart. It's only once you go out of your immediate family life and get exposed to other things do you start questioning your family life. Do you sit there and go, oh, this isn't typical, not everybody has this happen, or everybody's parents don't believe this, or maybe there are questions that I need to start asking. And that's the part of educated that is the educational part. It isn't just the formal education. She eventually gets herself out. She eventually gets herself all the way, and it's one heck of a convoluted ride, and how she gets to university, and then she gets to all the way to Cambridge, and she gets to Harvard. For those of you who have battled and tried to get into all those amazing schools and all that, and we talk about all these difficulties and challenges, it's almost, this is almost fairy tale-ish to some degree, but what she has to go through is Grimm Brothers fairy tale to get there. In other words, her background is not one that I'd want to have to go through to get through to any Ivy League college, university, whatever, even Cambridge, Oxford, or Harvard. But anyway, so you go through this, and what happens is, she's just retelling you bits and pieces of her life as she progresses on, and then finally it culminates. She's in Harvard, and she has graduated, and you still have this family pulling her back in. And one thing I'll say about this book is it's not lyrical writing. It's not suddenly a great, huge, short dissertation in beautiful words of her life experiences and how she sums it up. It's kind of, this is how I was raised, and this is where I'm at now, and I'm able to write about it because I was in the middle of it. I have a right to write about it. One of the things she talks about is this is not a comment about religion in any way. She did, there's a good chance, regardless of what religion her father was, this is where they would have went. And, this is just my story. And you just realize that, for my case, I work with kids that are in middle school, and I have to sit there and think about, this is about the age when you start realizing things that you were raised with might have other views. This is when you start that independent thinking, and it's hard because if you're in such a situation where survival is where you're at, that's all you're worried about, you have to trust in what your parents are telling you and believe in. And when that starts getting shaken by anybody, or you're being told by anybody their other beliefs, and they don't jive with where you just came from, how challenging and how scary that could be for an 11, 12, 13-year-old. When you start kind of going, wait a minute, my way of life is not typical. My way of life is not normal. You mean people have different views than this, and that all the logic that I've been fed, I'm now questioning. It's a huge, huge thing. And that was something I really pulled from this book. And to take that into consideration and to be gentle with my students, and to be, not going, how can you believe this? Well, it's because their only resource, their beloved, trusted resource, our parents. Whether I feel one way or the other about how a parent's raising a child doesn't matter. A child's going to believe what a parent tells them, and this is a huge responsibility we have as parents. She does do amazing things, but obviously she had a lot of drive and desire once it started happening, and curiosity. But I didn't feel that the book was all about her going to Cambridge and Harvard. It was at each stop either her interaction with that world because of what she didn't have as a background, or it was what she learned from that interaction of the world. So it's what she brought into that world with her unusual background, because she was not the typical Cambridge student, in perspective, but also to turn it around, how she felt in that world. And there was a lot of marginalization for her. There is one particular story whenever she's going off into college and she's in, and I can't remember if it's an art history style or class or what, but basically there is a photo or a picture that they're looking at, and underneath she says there's 3 words. You never learn what the 3 words are, all of them, but she talked about she understood the first word and she understood the last word, but she didn't understand that word in the middle. She then raises her hand. She asks her Jewish professor, historical professor, what this word means, and he basically turns his back. You can tell he's very livid with her. He's very shaken by what she said, and she immediately thinks, I'm going to fail, because he's obviously mad at me. And then she looks around the room to see how everybody else is reacting to her, and they're shock, anger, disgust. I mean, there's all these people looking at her with these weird, and she's just like, so she has to wait till the end of the class period, the whole time not understanding what she did. Even the young lady that she kind of created a relationship with very briefly was just shocked and horrified that she didn't know. And she goes off and she looks it up, and the word was Holocaust. She had never heard of Holocaust. She had never read it. She had never seen it. So, that's why everybody, that's being marginalized. That's, and this is marginalization by lack of information, lack of exposure to the rest of the world, that then she went out and put herself in. She had just stayed on her mountain, which you can tell by how she writes about it and describes it. It is home. It feels comfortable to her. But now and throughout the book, you feel her being pulled by the mountain, but at the same time, not what's waiting for her on the mountain. So very tough read, but very insightful. And I do encourage people to do it. It's not one that I would reread, and it's not one that I would recommend for a lot of people. I do have a couple people in mind. So for that purpose alone, it definitely can't be a 5-star. 4-star is really tough, because I don't even know. I would have this type of discussion with somebody before I would ever recommend it for them. So I think I'm going to level it 4, because it is so thought-provoking. I really, really can't get over. And now, and this is, I finished that mid-November. I am still thinking about it, and I think I will for a long time. So that's what I listened to in literature for November. And, if any of it sounds interesting, and if you have read about it, feel free to chat in the comments down below. And until next time, keep turning those pages. Have a great day.